Hey, this week we do some distro hopping. We talk about an Xorg vulnerability. We have a lot more coverage of the SSH backdoor in XZ. We talk about kernel stuff. We talk about containers. We talk about Thunderbird. It's a lot, and you don't want to miss it, so stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is the Untitled Linux Show, episode 146, recorded on April 6th, airing the dirty laundry on the Soapbox. Hey folks, welcome. It is Saturday. You know what that means. It is time to get geeky about Linux and open source and all things nerdy. It's the Untitled Linux Show, and we're going to have a lot of fun. It is, of course, not just me. We've got Rob, we've got Ken, we've got David. Welcome to each of you guys. Glad to have you here.
Excited to be here.
It'll be a fun show.
And you're going to have some interesting stuff to talk about.
We definitely will. Some updates and some things we've talked about in the past. Some new stuff going on, some exciting stuff going on. It's going to be good. We're going to start with Rob. And Rob, Dro Hopper's Corner. I like it. This is yours. It is soundly your thing. Take it away.
This has become my thing. So let's get started. Let me just get this. I just messed up my little share that I had going on here, and that is
you ruined it.
I did. And now it's time for another Dro Hopper's Corner. This week, I'm going to talk to you about a fun little distro just for you KDE fans out there, specifically you legacy KDE fans. Arix, spelled A-R-I-X, is a live Linux distro with KDE 1.1.2 desktop environment.
Oh, wow.
Old timers like me that have been using Linux for a while, this brings back some nostalgia. KDE 1 came out in 1998, year after I graduated high school. Just so you all know how old I am now, I guess. So I started using Linux in 1999, and then KDE 2 came out in 2000. So we're going back like about 25 years, give or take a year, depending. I don't know when 1.1.2 came out exactly, but about 25 years. So you might be thinking, that's fun and all, but what possible use can a 25-year-old desktop have today? Can it even work with today's technology? Well, the desktop environment may be old, but the underlying Linux is built on top of the current Debian 13 with the 6.6 kernel, which means you can install modern applications. When I was testing it out this week, I installed the latest Firefox using just a simple apt install Firefox-ESR, and everything worked just great. Right now, this is only a live disk distro, live USB distro, I guess, and not installable. I'm not sure if there's any plans to make it installable, but if not, I was thinking, maybe I could try one of those ISO tools to make something installable, to make your live install going, or someone else can run with that, or work with the Arix guy and make it for him or something. But for now, the process is simple. Burn the ISO to a USB or whatever, or boot it up in a VM like I did. And you will have two choices. You'll have two logins to choose from: the built-in Arix user and the root user. And then the password for both of those out of the box is just the number 1. But the one thing that caught me is the password field does not echo back or show any indication that you are typing in the box. Maybe that's how it was back then. I don't remember. But it's caught me off guard for a while. I had to ask the creator. I'm like, it's not taking my password. It's not working. I could type everywhere else. And he told me it's not echoing back. So all you do is you select your user, tab, or make sure you're in the password box, hit 1 and hit enter. It'll log in. For those watching, you can see behind me the Arix desktop right here. So it's got all the great things in it from KDE. And I don't think I'll be making this my daily driver anytime soon.
Probably not.
It is fun to remember how things used to be. And you could, I guess.
Yeah. So I want to say somebody did an April Fool's about something like this, actually. And then I also saw a theme where it's a very throwback theme. And I would say probably system themes are the way to do this rather than running ancient 1.x KDE software.
Yeah, and maybe that's why it's just a live distro right now. So, but you can go back and see how it really is, and not just the theme. You can really dig into it and just see what the past was like.
Yeah, and that's neat to do every once in a while. Don't connect it to the internet, but as with all retro computing, be very careful connecting to the internet.
Connect it to your local network and make sure there's a firewall up.
Pretty much. All right. So speaking of, I kind of got a bit of April 1st stuff in there. David, you got kind of the rundown for us of all of the things that weren't on April 1st. You know, it's been ironically said, or maybe not so ironically, April 1st is the day where you don't believe everything you read on the internet. And then you kind of think about that and go, wait a sec.
Indeed. So I've got a few articles, and one actually didn't even make it on here. And that's because it was a link to Twitter. One of their engineers supposedly got a System 76 tattoo on April 1st. I looked at the image and did not see any indications that it was a real tattoo. So I'm pretty sure that was April Fool's joke as well. But April 1st, traditionally known as April Fool's, is always a fun time for press releases because you have to take everything with a grain of salt. Mm-hmm. So I've got 4 quick press releases to go over. The first one is TrueNAS. They came out in a surprising move on April 1st to let everyone know that they had decided to move away from free BSD as their underlying OS and move 100% to Windows. In fact, they were so on board that they were available in the Windows Store, at least according to the press release. Found no evidence of any of this to be true, so I quickly moved on. Relatedly, its FLOSS had a headline that in addition to Microsoft pushing Ubuntu for the Windows subsystem for Linux, because of the number of computers that can't run Windows 11 and Windows 10 reaching an end of life very soon, they are now pushing people to just simply upgrade to Ubuntu. And they included a clearly doctored screenshot of the Windows Update wizard with a link to upgrade to Ubuntu. So those were the two the two headlines and the picture that I found, and I just had a chuckle, so I wanted to share them. Now, on the other side of things that were announced on April 1st, but they appear to be real, there's an operating system, Nitrix. I assume I'm pronouncing that correctly, Nitrux, which, as an aside, is interesting because it is a non-System D version of Linux. They use an alternate init system, but they are planning on moving away from KDE, so they are not rolling out KDE Plasma 6. They're sticking with the latest 5 version, and they're going to move to a Maui shell in the future. And they said that while they have great love for KDE, that they are making this transition because there's just too many integration issues with KDE version 6. Mm-hmm. But on the flip side, Fedora may be doubling down on KDE Plasma 6. And this one I actually thought was an April Fool's joke, but the author of the proposal actually came back and said, no, it was not a joke. It was just timing was just a coincidence, and he's serious. So he is suggesting or proposing that with Fedora 42, they make KDE Plasma 6 the default desktop. The reason why I think pretty much everybody in this group that uses Fedora probably already picks KDE. But still, for people that just go and download the default install, the tyranny of the default means that most of those people are going to stay on GNOME. So anyway, I know that Jonathan has ties into the Fedora community, and I was just curious what his thoughts were on this proposal.
Yeah, so it was not an April Fool's joke, but I don't think there's much of any expectation that this is actually going to happen, at least at this point. Really, it seemed to be more of a proposal to throw out there to make people think about things. And one of the things they want people to think about is when you go to download Fedora, unless you know exactly what you're looking for, you're not going to get the KDE spin. You're just going to get the GNOME spin because that is the one that is so much easier to find. And then, so as I said, at this point, it's not very likely at all that it's going to be a real thing. It might at some point in the future, it might become KDE by default, but I think the expectation right now is that Fedora is going to remain a GNOME mainline
primarily
chip.
because G becomes before K in the alphabet.
Oh, so in the back channel that I am a part of the Fedora guys, they went to town renaming everything about Fedora with a K, and some of the results were hilarious. System K. It was great. It was much fun was had.
I have to say though, when I did use Fedora, I was not a KDE user.
Does Fedora have a XFCE spin?
It does.
Yes,
it does.
Okay.
I tell you what I would like to see, actually, and I don't know. This is kind of, I think, what they're aiming at. What I would like to see is not a default. And by this, I mean, you go to download Fedora and you go to download Fedora Workstation and you get the list. Here are the official supported Fedora workstations. This one for GNOME, this one for KDE, this one for XFCE. That way everybody knows that they exist. You click on the one you want and you get it. Somebody go get the European, you tell the European Union that it's a trust problem and we'll get a better chooser. That's how we deal with this kind of thing.
When I switched to Fedora a couple of years ago and I switched away, that is actually when I switched to GNOME, and that's where I've been ever since. So it's all because of Jonathan telling me to go to Fedora that I'm now on GNOME, I think.
Instructions not clear. Yeah. Yeah. Just. All right. So let's move on to something a little bit more positive and encouraging rather than Rob running GNOME. FFmpeg. So we have been kind of teasing about this for a while with FFmpeg 7 coming out, and there's some neat stuff here. One of the big ones is FFmpeg 7 is finally the one that comes with multi-threaded. So it's got, by default in the command line, when you go to do some process on a file, a big file, video file, whatever, it's going to now in a multi-threaded way churn through that file rather than just using a single thread, which means it's going to get things done a lot faster. It's also going to use more of your CPU, so things to be aware of there. There are some other fun things in FFmpeg 7. Some new file formats are supported. One of the ones that I've seen touted are, let's see, what is it? The VVC, the Versatile Video Coding Decoder. And of course, there's some other things that are in there. It looks like a solid FFmpeg release. Now, it is kind of funny. One of the projects that I'm involved in, this dropped, and the lead developer of the project was like, "Man, we don't even fully support FFmpeg 6 yet." It's like, whoops. Uh-oh. So it keeps moving along.
I thought Ken with all his FFmpeg tips would be taking that story today.
No, I felt like it would have been duplicating from somebody earlier in the week in the ULS Open discussion.
You don't want to steal it.
I thought that's where we got all our ideas from.
Yeah, but I try to find different links for them.
Yeah, true. Yeah, yeah, so coming to a distro near you. Let us know if something breaks. Be interested to hear it. Ken, speaking of new releases, we've got a new release of Thwupd coming that's going to use something new and fun.
Yes, Jonathan. In fact, Marius Nestor reports on Thwupd developer and maintainer Richard Hughes' announcement that future releases of the popular Linux firmware updater is moving away from XZ utils and will adopt Z standard or Z stand instead. It's understandable that open source developers are looking for an alternative compression utility after the XZ backdoor fiasco. One appealing choice is Z standard that Richard is going to be using. You may find it already on your system if you type in zstd-v-version. But it will provide a lossless data compression algorithm that proves to be faster than XZ when decompressing. In fact, many popular GNU Linux distributions are already using zstand as the default package compression method for faster installations, including Arch Linux, which adopted the Z standard method in October of 2019 with the release of the Pacman 5.2 package manager, and switched from XZ to zstand for all packages in the official repository in January of 2020. Now, in related news, Richard Hughes announced that he is also considering enforcing signed commits for Thwupd in an attempt to prevent supply chain issues like the XZ backdoor. However, this is something that is still being discussed on the project's GitHub page. Now, later, when we get into the command line tips, I'll cover how you can use zstand with your archive files.
Yeah, and we've got some other things related to the XZ story as well coming up here in just a minute. I will let the cat out of the bag just a tiny bit. Personally, I think it is premature to move away from XZ because there is still a maintainer there that is known to be a good actor, but and by good actor I mean not malicious, of course. There's another maintainer that was there that was a good actor in that he was good at acting, but was malicious. Anyway, I need a rim shot button for those. Goodness, the dad jokes. So anyway, I think that's a little premature. I also find it extremely interesting to watch all of the different open source organizations and distros and projects and how they're now looking at what happened to XZ and they're going, man, how can we avoid that? What can we go do that's going to help our security? And I have some thoughts on that too. We'll get to in just a bit, but very, very useful to see. So, do we want to talk vulnerabilities? I think Rob is up next.
Let's do that.
All right.
So this week on another Use Whalen Corner, we're going to talk about more reasons that came out this week to use Whalen. And it isn't so much that this just came out this week as much as it was just discovered. And that is that 4 more security issues have discovered in Xorg and X-Whalen, or the shim to get X apps to work on Whalen. 3 of the 4 CVEs made public this week seem to be related to a byte swap vulnerability that was discovered last year that led the Xorg team to disable byte swap clients by default. So 3 of those CVEs made public this week. They involve heap buffer overread / data leakage within proc xi get selected events, proc xi passive grab device, proc apple dric create pixmap, and due to the byte swap handling. The 4th issue raised this week is a use after free within proc render add glyphs. And from what I've heard, use after free is often not a very good one, or it really opens the door for other things. But in general, I don't really know what these mean. But what I do know is that X-Whalen 23.2.5 and X.org server 21.1.12 were published this week to fix these latest 4 security issues. So if you are still using Xorg, make sure to update. If you are using Wayland, you're likely still stuck using X-Wayland to support those apps that haven't fully ported to Wayland, so update that. In fact, no matter what you use, Windows, Mac, Linux, doesn't matter. It's a good idea to update regularly anyway. So just update. It's a good time. It's your weekly reminder. And if you're a distro maintainer that isn't supporting Wayland yet, get on that. And if you're an app developer whose apps aren't fully ported to Wayland, what are you waiting for? Quit forcing me to use X-Wayland to use your apps. And one last thing. For you Linux users using X.org, I know the news that I bring every other week about a new security vulnerability, or maybe not quite that much in X.org, seems bleak, but you are still more secure than Windows, in my opinion. Don't sue me if you're Microsoft. And the great thing about open source is that things get fixed fast once discovered. The study's been a while ago that I've read, maybe a year ago now, but statistically, Linux fixes things faster than the rest of them. Back to you, Jonathan.
All right. So when Fedora got into the kerfluffle about is it going to stop shipping KDE support for Wayland, I made the point, well, what's going to happen when X11 is no longer maintained and somebody finds the next security vulnerability? And one of the guys that was dead set against the change, so thought that Fedora needed to continue to ship X11 support for KDE, says, "Oh, I'm pretty sure that we found the last of the X11 vulnerabilities."
That was the last one.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's right. We did find the last.
Yeah, so surely this is the last one, right? Surely. This
until
one.
we
This
find the new one.
This is the one he was talking about, yeah.
And I liked Rob's comment that I'm not sure what this means, but, and then he went on to talk about it, and we are all pundits here. Doesn't matter whether we understand it completely or not, we can talk about it.
Yeah, we try to make it clear when we are not as in the know as someone who is in this world all the time. So, yeah. Use after free usually just means, hey, you've got a pointer to something in memory, but you free that thing in memory. And now you have a pointer that you don't know where it goes to. It may go to uninitialized memory. It may go to something else in the system. And what's really bad is when you then try to jump to a function referred to by that pointer. And that's how you usually get remote code execution.
And I
Or
did.
get rebooted.
For all those things that I did not know what they meant, mostly the proc xi whatever, the use after free, I did have a decent grasp on that one, but thanks for refreshing me and the audience.
Oh, fun.
Well, we've got to air our dirty laundry somewhere.
Yes,
yeah, exactly.
So we've had already some comments about this. We have had comments in the chat room. So Aaron says, the XZ thing is good for awareness and benefits of many eyes on open source. But he says the media has sensationalized this, as they are wont to do. And I think we would generally agree with that. And David's got the story where he wants to, as he says, get on the soapbox and air some dirty laundry. I think we may be mixing our metaphors there, but it's a fun mental picture all the same.
Absolutely. So I'm going to bring everybody else back in at the end of this because it's worth talking about. But it really frustrates me, and of course you've already touched on it. But it really frustrates me when, especially the bastions of closed source, the old hats of the closed ecosystem, traditional news media, they go, open source is so terrible. Here's all the different times when it gets compromised, and it's so easy to sneak code in there and everything. And I think that we can pull out a lot of examples, but this most recent one is a very good example of the benefit of open source. If you're running code on your server or on your workstation, on a computer, in a virtual machine, and it doesn't act correctly, it doesn't, you notice something out of the ordinary. With open source, you can actually dig into it right there yourself. You don't have to submit a bug report that may get ignored for 6 months. You can find out what's going on. You can talk to community, even if, kind of like what we were talking about being pundits, even if you don't know the details or completely understand it yourself, you can say, hey, something doesn't seem right. And there is a whole community of people around the world who are going to be more than happy to jump in and get to the bottom of it. So there are always going to be bugs. There are always going to be issues. We like maybe not like, but it's easy to pick on Microsoft because they have been around for a long time. And on the enterprise side of things, a lot of companies run their software called Exchange. Exchange has been in the news a lot. They have bugs in Exchange that they've just chosen not to fix. Whereas if you're running one of the open source email systems, and even if the maintainers choose not to fix it, you have the freedom to go fix it yourself or hire somebody to fix it for you. Mm-hmm. So I would like to bring in everybody else just to get their opinion, but I think I know that we all are pretty much in agreement that it's not a bad thing that the open source dirty laundry gets aired. It's a good thing because it lets us clean it up and keep moving forward with a better solution.
Yep. All right. So a couple things. First off, in this case, Microsoft was the good guy. It was actually a Microsoft engineer that found the problem. He was doing micro benchmarking on one of the SQL servers. I forget which one it was.
Postgres.
Yeah, Postgres. Okay. Mm-hmm. So he is a Microsoft employee that gets paid to work on Postgres, which that in of itself is cool. Like, good job, Microsoft. But he was doing benchmarking, trying to look for problems in the Postgres code. And I've read his original post, and he essentially says, I was trying to get a baseline for my machine, and so I was looking at what it was doing. And SSH was spiking my processor to like 100% for 500 milliseconds. And but that's not right. Something's going on here. So he started digging into that and discovered a backdoor. So this idea of dirty laundry, the XZ backdoor actually made it into released software, and it lived there for about 2 months, right? That's what it looks like between the 5.6.0 release and the mailing list release. It was roughly a month, 2 months, somewhere in that ballpark. So there's a story that I am aware of. It's an old story that sort of serves as the closed source alternative to how this goes. And that is Crypto AG. Crypto AG is a cryptography company that was started out of World War II. And Crypto AG made cryptography devices for governments. And in 1955, there was a handshake between the owner of Crypto AG and the equivalent of the U.S. National Security Agency at that time. I believe it was the CIA and the predecessor to the NSA. That not only would Crypto AG only sell its most capable products to the friends of the United States, the NSA would also get to write the user's manuals for all of those products. And as you can imagine, that sort of tumbled into they were shipping known problematic stuff to other countries that were not friends of the US. Essentially, there was a backdoor in this cryptography. That handshake happened in 1955. It was not publicly announced. It did not make the news that this had happened until 1995. So when you have a backdoor added to open source software, it usually gets found in 1 to 2 months. When you have a backdoor added in black box closed source software, it lasts 40 years.
Yeah, I think
which would you prefer?
I think these are fine examples of how things get found and resolved. Usually, often relatively quickly. I mean, this one was fairly quickly before it got into most mainline mainline software, but it was able to get reversed. There still are, just like your story there's plenty of bad actors, I mean, in closed source software, and there are plenty of people making software out there for a charge that's proprietary, looking for help and getting some random person, just like XZ did, some random person saying, hey, I'll help you with that. Oh, maybe he'll ask for a few bucks. Maybe he'll just say, put my name on, or whatever. Who knows what he says to get himself in there. And there's no reason why proprietary software isn't as vulnerable. And when it gets in there, nobody's looking at it except for the few people who maintain that software, and they're focused more on adding that next feature. If they don't see the bug and they wrote the code, they're not going to think that there's a problem with it.
Yep.
Even in those cases where it's kind of a mix, I'm thinking about Log4j as an example, where there were a lot of people using Log4j in their own binaries. Again, on the systems running the code, the compiled binaries can't be decompiled easily, and even if you could, you can't pull parts of it out. So it wasn't quite as deep as pure closed proprietary, but still you have so many different places where one thing references another thing. You've got libraries referencing libraries potentially. And when it's open source, and we talk about how licenses can poison your code and things, but the benefit of everything having to be open source from the top to the bottom is that even if the issue is with a library that your library called, you as the end developer have much more flexibility in addressing it in an emergency situation or a rapid necessity.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. So interesting stuff there. Now, in looking at this topic, I came across a story that is very germane, because it may be that the exact same thing was attempted on another project. And so I've got a link here. The initial link is off to 404 Media, which is not somebody I would normally link to, but they have a very interesting take on this. So it is a patch that was sent into Fdroid, which Fdroid is the alternative, very almost militantly open source Android app store. And somebody sent in a patch to make searchability better. And then that person and other people, which again may or may not have been real people, this could be another case of sock puppet accounts, came on and said, hey, this is really great. I need this functionality. Let's merge this patch. Come on, it looks good. Let's merge it. Come on, what are you waiting for? Merge the patch already. Come to find out, the patch had a SQL injection vulnerability in it. It would have let someone that knew what was going on, or even somebody that stumbled across it, run code in SQL, and then probably eventually on the back end of Fdroid, which is kind of a big deal. And it's not clear that this with Fdroid was a state-sponsored. It's not even clear that this thing with Fdroid was malicious. It may not have been. It may have just been bad code that was written and then people excited about a new feature. Like that happens too. So we don't know for sure. The point that 404 Media makes is that there is a potential problem here with, and they use the term bullying, and I think that's an okay term to use, when open source developers get pressured by their users, is particularly what they're talking about here. And I think that's really interesting, because it is a thing that happens. I've seen it happen before. A lot of times it happens without people even meaning to. Like there was one of the other projects I'm involved in. Somebody came in and was asking questions, and they just kind of makes this statement like, I think it makes more sense if developer resources were put towards fixing this thing rather than the other. And all the developers were like, excuse me, we are not resources. We are people. That is our time you're talking about. You don't get to come into our Discord and tell us what we need to work on. And I don't think the guy meant it maliciously at all, but it was sort of not taken well. And the reason is because people come in and they make statements like that all the time, and developers just get tired of it. And so there's that. And that is obviously, because we've seen it in the case of XZ, That is one of these tools that can be used to try to manipulate a developer. I have this thought, though, that one of the tools that developers have to fight back is to tell people to go away. And when I read this 404 article, my mind went back to a guest we had years and years and years and years ago on FLOSS Weekly, who made a statement, something about in the world of open source software, meritocracy has to die. And when I heard, I wasn't even the co-host, I was just a listener at the time. And when I heard that, my mind just went, because it's like, if we're not judging patches on their merit, then what are we going to judge them on? Right? It's like, no. We want meritocracy in open source. Like, that is the only system that has ever worked in open source. That is the only thing that gets working code. And so I almost wonder if there has been a push in open source, and I'll just put it this way, there's been a push to be nicer. Does that make open source projects a little bit more susceptible to their maintainers getting bullied into accepting bad code? I will throw that out as an ongoing thought and let you guys think about it with me. What do you think?
I don't know. I think it could go either way. I mean, niceness doesn't necessarily mean that you're letting anything in. You can still be nice about like and tell people no. But
this is a very undercooked thought that I have had literally this afternoon. I was driving around and thinking about this. Like,
there's potential. I mean,
have code of conducts gone too far? Have we pushed code of conducts to the point to where they're killing? It's that sort of thing. That same line of thinking, which is worth thinking through, even if you come to the conclusion that no, it's not a problem.
Well, I tell you what, if you're a developer and you want to work on some code and don't have anybody bug you about what you should do with it, come work on some of my open source programs. Nobody uses them. So then, therefore, nobody says anything to you.
All right. Ken, I think Ken was trying to get in, then we'll get to David.
Just remember, there's two sides to every single coin out there.
True. All right, David, I want to hear your thoughts.
I was just simply going to say that the open source ecosystem kind of looks up to, I'm not going to say the founder of it because, there's the GNU project and a bunch of different things, but Linus, he is the beginner of Linux. He is what so much of all our code is based on. And as long as he is fearlessly being Linus, I mean, the rest of us, we can be pretty mean and still be considered on the nice side of the scale.
Yes, we need Linus there to pin the Overton window.
Exactly.
That's the
Not
bar.
Charlie Brown.
Oh, indeed.
Oh,
no, not
grief.
Charlie Brown. You guys. Yeah, no, that's interesting. And we may revisit this in a future episode because I think it is worth thinking about how all of this works together, and this idea that a developer sort of needs to be able to fire a user, not in you can't use the software, but I'm no longer interested in what you have to say about my work. You can just go away.
Yeah, no, the whole concept of open source, we're still somewhat driven by money. I mean, all of us have to eat, but it allows us not to steal from what I'm going to mention later on, but we had a great talk with Joshua Culp of the Asterisk Project, and that's an open source project where we took a little bit of time and talked about how they manage their project overall, how they accept submissions and stuff. And there's benefits to being able to specify and have money coming not from necessarily from end users, but from organizations and enterprises that want to focus on the security, that want to focus on stability, that want to focus on this thing. So then when you get an end user popping up screaming, hey, I want this, whatever, you're safe to ignore them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the real interesting things that Joshua told us there is in the Asterisk project, maintainers are absolutely and only employees of Sangoma, the company that's kind of the overarch of Asterisk now that owns the Asterisk project. To be a maintainer of Asterisk, you must be an employee of Sangoma. And like I told him a month ago, I would have thought, man, that's kind of onerous. That may be going too far. I was like, I can definitely see the point. There is something to be said for that. They'll still accept patches from everybody. You know, somebody writes a patch and they like it, they'll pull it into the program. You're still free to fork it if you want to, but the official Asterisk, the project, the tarballs, only comes from Sangoma. And I think there probably is a bit of trustworthiness that comes along with that.
And his point was he's more likely to trust somebody he can walk down the hall and look in their eyes.
Yes. Well, that's something else that's come to mind with this, like Debian. To be a Debian packager, you must have met another Debian packager in person. And I think there's even a requirement to show a driver's license, or if not, it's been talked about. But like you must meet in person to get your key signed, and you have to have your key signed to be able to do anything in the Debian ecosystem. And so one of the things that does is that kind of guarantees that we're talking about real people. We're not talking about some, avatar created by special services somewhere. So I don't know. There are things that not very long ago we thought were really weird that suddenly make a lot of sense. One of the,
I'm pretty sure special services could get a fake license though and meet in person.
Yes, but if they do that, so I thought through this too. If they do that, and then it gets determined that such and such was, they've burned that operative.
Right. I can't do
because
it again
somebody
with
had
a different name.
Well, you'd have to do it again with a different person, but you also know that person that was representing themselves as an open source software developer is actually an employee of NSA or GRU or whatever, what have you. So like that's, I think it at the very least, it makes this sort of thing more expensive, like significantly more. We're not just talking about dollars, but more expensive for one of these groups to try to pull it off. I personally think that I think it would be wise for open source in general to follow the example of Debian. And if you're going to give co-maintainership, if we're talking about anything that is important at all, if you're going to give co-maintainership to someone, you need to meet them in person to know that you're talking about a real person. Because it's been more than once now that this sort of thing has happened, where a non-real person, an avatar, was either given or asked for maintainership. So
that can even apply to the way you're packaging and distributing.
So that's one of the other things. Yeah, Ken, that's one of the other things that people are now talking about. Because one of the other ways that this was pulled off is you had your Git in GitHub, and then a tarball was created, but the thing in Git did not 100% match what was in the tarball. And so people are now talking about, well, Git itself has this way where you have a tar that gets generated based on a Git tag. And then you don't have you don't have a human involved in that. It's just the Git code. And so I think one of the other things that distro maintainers are going to start looking at is how can we have essentially reproducible tar files. We're talking about reproducible binaries. That's a thing that, reproducible builds of binaries where they match bit for bit. I think that conversation needs to be moved back further in the stream, and people are looking at it. How do we get bit for bit reproducible tarballs so that we can audit and know the thing that we just downloaded is exactly what is in the Git? And then there's other things being done, like when we do the build for real, let's go in and remove all of the auto make cruft and regenerate that. Let's remove all of the test files and just know that we have just the code that we think we have that's going into it. So there's a lot of tightening that's being done around sort of the open source ecosystem right now to try to avoid this happening again.
I saw
Do we need to have the application maintainers take responsibility for the creation of the snaps lab packs as well as the devs?
That's always going to be interesting. I think probably, it's an open question, like what that needs to look like. Obviously, you've got a little bit more protection built into the snaps and the flat packs as opposed to a system binary. But there's open questions to be had. Rob, you were going to say?
I was going to say slightly off topic, but I saw a chat this week on Reddit questioning the safety of Ventoy, just because apparently there's a lot of potentially unknown blobs in there, even though it's open source.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I think it's, if I remember right, it's like binaries that in their code that are actually open source other places, so there's no reason to like have that binary there. They could actually have the code there, if I remember right.
Yeah, I'd say that's fair. I think there's probably a lot of projects out there that are now going to get sort of the stink eye looking at them real close. Another one is RustDesk, right? Mm-hmm. RustDesk is owned by some Chinese investment firm. They got bought out not too many months ago, and there is a lot of Chinese influence there. And, I do not make that statement because of a racism against the Chinese people, but because of a wariness of the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party that can exhibit, if they choose to, so much influence and control over Chinese corporations. And so things like RustDesk are a little suspect because of that.
If that was just a few months ago, I want to say it was like at least a year ago, RustDesk pulled back a lot of their open source code and closed off a lot of features of them. You could still use the basic stuff, but I think it was the server side stuff is what it was.
Yep. No, absolutely. All right, let's roll forwards and let's talk about Thunderbird. This sounds like it should be the title of a James Bond film. It is not. It is Mozilla's email client. Ken, what is new with Thunderbird?
Well, Jonathan, we hear some Thunderbird news from Bobby Borisov and Marius Nestor. Bobby reports Thunderbird has announced its commitment to maintain the Thunderbird Snap available in the Snap Store, thus emphasizing the team's decision to support Linux users across all distributions. You may remember Thunderbird took ownership of the Thunderbird Flatpak last year, marking it as the official recommended package for Linux users. This recent announcement indicates Thunderbird is extending its support to include the Thunderbird Snap, a decision set to benefit primarily Ubuntu users alongside the broader Snap user base. The goal is to cater to as broad a user base as possible without bias towards user package preferences. Bobby also reports the Thunderbird team celebrated the completion of initial Exchange auto-discovery and OAuth compatibility in account setup. Marius reports the Linux Mint devs have decided to package Thunderbird as a deb package for the upcoming Linux Mint 22 release. This is the second app Linux Mint devs must package in the native deb format after Mozilla Firefox. I recommend reading both Bobby and Marius's articles for the information I didn't cover.
Yeah, interesting to see that sort of dance back and forth between, is it going to officially be a snap? Is it officially going to be a .deb? People are still trying to figure out what they want to do with snaps. What are we going to do with snaps?
Put fingers together.
Yeah, I guess. I am still looking forward to the Exchange compatibility working. I think that'll be helpful for a lot of people.
Definitely. That's something I plan to test out as soon as possible, which might be more my schedule than their software delivery schedule.
Yeah,
it's on my list.
Understand that. It's going to be hilarious if we get to the day where Thunderbird is the flagship product. And oh, by the way, they also have a browser. Maybe one of these days. I don't know what it looks like now. All right, Rob, let's talk about laptops. Let's talk about Ubuntu on laptops.
So, unfortunately, one of the things I see people struggling with on Linux and laptops is getting the best battery performance possible. It is a powerful OS, obviously. We all know that. And you can tweak anything and everything to fit your needs. And I think sometimes the basic desktop users they just don't always see the best battery life. At least that's what I gather from a lot of the Linux groups I'm in and questions I see. I often see questions about battery life. It's not good. How can I get it better? Personally, I'm pretty much always near a power outlet, so I don't really pay a lot of attention to how long the battery is running. If it's low, I plug it in. I don't pay attention if it's been on battery for an hour or 10 hours. I don't know. I can't focus like that. I'm just kind of I don't know, distractible. But anyway, with mobile devices such as laptops, obviously battery life is important, and I'd love to have a nice laptop in theory with a battery that lasts for days, but Ubuntu sees the importance, and in Ubuntu 24.04 they're looking to improve power efficiency on laptops. They could probably start by not installing so many snaps, but I digress. I was surprised I was surprised this wasn't a thing already. I thought they already had these things, but here's what they got. The release notes for the Power Profiles daemon package that were just uploaded says that it is now battery state aware, and that some drivers use a more power efficient state when using the battery or the balance profile on the battery. On Intel and AMD that support the P-state drivers, the balance profile in Ubuntu is now mapped to the processor's power safe mode. But then it's now mapped to the balance mode.
Okay.
It was mapped to the balance mode. Now it's the balanced, or instead of the balanced performance profile in the background. I found an error in my notes that just really threw me off there. So
there's a train wreck in Rob's mind. We just saw it happen.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. It's like my notes. I think I somehow grabbed a line and it went up here, and it right in the middle of a different thought, and I was like, I don't know. But anyway, when the power cable is connected, also it's gonna know that and put you more into a performance mode. Other changes in the power profile daemon include typical code optimizations, typical fixes, and one of the fixes for the power profiles CTL command line tool, improved documentation, and autocomplete.
Cool. Always neat to see battery life and power performance in laptops get better. Most folks know about some of the weird things that I've had with my laptop, the one that I generally run the show off of, where sometimes the official power cord is not enough to keep the thing charging. And we've had a couple of shows that in the middle of it, my laptop would just turn itself off because it got down to 0%, plugged in and everything. So
at least those dozen or so people watching live see that. I don't think anyone on the recording actually realizes that happens.
If we do our job correctly, they are oblivious to it.
Because we got great editors.
Yes. All right. Let's we've been here. We are over an hour. Let's move on to David's last story. And David wants to talk about containers and how they're the future.
Indeed. And I will not spend much time here. You can dig into the show notes. InfoWorld has a great article on it, but it's actually a project. It's called Project Bluefin. It is based on Fedora and the containerization that is already built into Fedora. In fact, Bluefin's founder, I think it's Jorge Castro, if I'm pronouncing that right, says Bluefin is Fedora. And I am actually planning on, not to take away from Rob's distro hopping corner, but I am actually planning on testing this out. It's been focused on gamers, but there is so much overlap between power developers and gamers in their needs. And one of the really cool things about what Project Bluefin is doing, and this is the point that the InfoWorld article makes, is that you take that container OS, you get the binary NVIDIA drivers working. They actually have some ASUS specific drivers for the motherboards and things. You get all that stuff functional as a container in the OS, and then you can just develop on top of it. And then when you need to update your OS, it is atomic, it is distinct, it is controlled, so you don't run the risk of breaking something, which so often happens, and then you're down for a while. I mean, we do love tinkering. I mean, that's part of what's so awesome about open source, about Linux and stuff. But a lot of us, when we're doing DevOps, when we're working, we don't want our work computer we don't want to have to tinker with our work computer. So that's where the benefit of containerizing the OS really comes out and shines. So we've looked at containerization on the server workloads and in other places, but now we're talking about, okay, let's do that on a desktop in a way so that your desktop is always stable. And I'm not saying that this is the year of the Linux desktop, but these sorts of advances bring us closer to finally having a Linux desktop that we all can use reliably.
Yeah, so I'm real curious. What is the difference between Bluefin and something like Fedora Silverblue or Fedora Kinoite, which those are the Fedora Atomic desktops for GNOME and KDE?
The difference is because they're gamer focused, and I think they're actually built off of those. They take those and then they add in the proprietary drivers for like NVIDIA, the proprietary ASUS drivers and stuff, so that you can get an ISO specific to your hardware.
So this is what Nobara is to main Fedora.
Exactly.
Bluefin is to the Atomic Fedora.
Except Nobara, because I never got to the point of installing Nobara, but I looked at it a lot. In fact, you recommended it to me probably a year ago or more. Yeah. I looked at that, but they were always lagging. Bluefin is I don't know if they have a larger developer base or what it may be, but Bluefin is much more cutting edge with their hardware support.
Lagging as in fallen behind on this.
Yes. Like Nobara would be a whole version or two behind whatever Fedora was currently.
Yeah, specifically, Nobara was still shipping Fedora based on Fedora 38, while Fedora had 39 out. And the reason that is because Nobara was doing things like running a bleeding edge kernel with a whole bunch of patches on it and running, bleeding edge a couple of other things. They would have patched Wayland or patched X11. They'd be running a patched version of KDE to have all of this cool stuff built into it. But that meant that it was a big lift to then jump to the next major version with Fedora and having to make sure that all that stuff worked the way it was supposed to. Yeah. No, it's cool. It would be, sounds like something interesting to look at. And if you do install it, you have to let us know how it goes.
Yeah, I've got 2 ASUS laptops here. They're my daily drivers. So I'm going to throw it on one and definitely test it out. Might not be for a week or two, depending on my schedule, but I'll have something to report eventually.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't put it on both of them at the same time. Sounds like a bad idea. If you've got 2 mission critical computers, put a different distro on each of them. All right. So something else that is coming along nicely that we can talk about is EVDF. So we kind of like to follow along with things going on in the Linux kernel. And this is a new kernel scheduler. It's the earliest eligible virtual deadline first. And it's actually based on a research paper from the 90s. Now, we got kind of a basic EEVDF merged back in Linux 6.6, but Peter Zistra, the guy behind it, has now come along and said, he says, I'm slowly crawling back out of the hole and trying to get back to work. And he is working on this again to try to make it even more usable, make it crash less. Apparently, it's you get the feeling you're running bleeding edge code if you're running the EEVDF. But there's some fun things coming in this, and it looks like in Linux 6.10, it's going to actually be, and they use the term functionally complete. So it's going to be at a point to where maybe you might want to take a look at it. And one of the really interesting things that this should do is give you a bit lower latency system while still giving you good throughput. Some really interesting things. And like I said, it's based on that research paper from back in the 90s. But it sounds like it might be something worth taking a look at when it finally is stable. Caught my eye this week. Ken, something caught your eye this week. The LXC project?
Yes. In particular, the article Bobby Borisoff wrote about the LXC team unveiling the release of LXC 6.0 LTS. It culminates 2 years of dedicated work since the last major update, LXC 5.0, representing the project's sixth long-term support iteration, promising support until June 2029. What's new in LXC 6.0 LTS? There are several enhancements and new features that improve user experience and expand functionality. First, we have the multi-call binary. The second is sit timeout function. The third one that caught my eye was the IPv6 support and support for SquashFS. If you don't know what the multi-call binary is going to be doing, that's basically where it's introducing the ability to consolidate multiple LXC commands into a single binary, which will optimize significantly that LXC and reduce disk space usage, making it especially beneficial for embedded systems. I'll let you read the show notes to find out the full benefits of some of the others, as well as some of the enhancements that I didn't even touch on.
Now, I'm trying to remember, is it LXC that is kind of now an Ubuntu project?
Yes, Canonical pulled it in so that basically it's only Canonical employees that are working on it.
Yeah.
Sound familiar?
That's what I was thinking.
It does, actually. That's interesting. I need to go back and look at the details of how that works to see whether the new and more security aware me thinks that's a good idea or not.
Yeah, because we didn't think too highly of it, I don't know, 6 months ago or whenever that was that we announced it on the show. And now all of a sudden, we didn't even bring it up. And it sounded like you were defending it earlier before we even talked about it.
Yeah. I like I said, I'll have to go back and look at the details, but it may be a case where in retrospect, okay, Canonical, that was a decent deal. That was a good idea.
But because in the true open source fashion, though, you still got a fork of it.
Yes,
you remember.
of course. Is it Incus?
I think that was the name of it.
That is at least the name of one of the forks. I think Incus is the fork of LXD.
Which goes to show, if somebody doesn't want to take your commit what you've suggested, fork it.
Yes, absolutely. That is the point. That is literally the point of the open source license. All right, let's get into some command line tips. And we've got Rob up first with an awesome idea, hopefully.
Well, you have to stop saying command line tips because they're not always command line tips. It's a tip, just a tip. But often in the Linux communities I'm in, there's often new people in there or people who've been in there a while. They're setting up a home lab and they're looking for projects like, what kind of, I got this server here and what kind of projects can I do with it? And I always have my few go-tos like Pi-hole Asterisk, which I've always used the PBX in a Flash or Incredible PPX to get Asterisk going. Those are a couple of the projects. Or Home Assistant, things like that. And, my list never gets a whole lot more than maybe half a dozen. But if you're looking for ideas, there is an open source list called Awesome Self-Hosted. So you can find it just by search GitHub for Awesome Self-Hosted, and you should be able to find it. but it'll take you to a website. It's awesomeselfhosted.net. Well, I mean, it'll take you to GitHub, but they have a link to a website, awesomeselfhosted.net. You can contribute to that list on their GitHub page and make suggestions. But on here, it's all kinds of self-hosted stuff, remote access, backups, automation, calendars, DNS, database management, free readers. A huge list, almost too big.
Video games apparently too.
Sure,
The top hit is 0AD.
Oh, yes,
It's a video game.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. It sounds like maybe there's a little more than just something you put on a server, but the point of it is, self-hosting is the practice of hosting and managing applications on your own servers instead of consuming from a software as a service provider. So, doing your own groupware, having your own email service instead of Office 365 or whatever it might be, or you just want to set up some projects. Here's a spot you can get some ideas.
Cool. I like it. I like it a lot. All right. Looks like David is up next, and let's see how this will work. We have some new software on the back end here for doing the show, and I don't think there is a way that I can do just David with his screen, so you get to see all of our faces in Brady Bunch fashion while we look at David's screen. Hang on. I cannot unmute my guest because they have chosen to mute themselves.
That is terrible. I was too busy pressing buttons and hit the wrong ones. All right, here we go. So this actually happened because I happen to use Vim all the time. And we had a brief discussion in the back channel, I think it was earlier today, and somebody made a joke about how to exit Vim in 52 simple steps. And I looked back and realized nobody had ever talked about Vim. So I figured I would bring Vim out into the open. And I also decided to take the first stab at doing a screen share with this new software. So we get to test it all. Cool. First, why Vim? Vim, if you do anything with remote headless servers, Vim is one of the smallest, oldest, lightest weight editors on text editors on Linux. What's actually VI was the original one. And then Vim is VI improved. So it's something that even if it's not your daily driver, and there are people who are hardcore enough that it is their daily driver, I've seen them with my own eyes, it's still something that is at least useful to know how to get around in. So it's starting it as simple as just typing Vim and then your file. You can start Vim without a file and then open a file in Vim using commands, but because I want to demonstrate moving around and exiting and everything, I'm going to specify a file on the command line. So I've got a Redis log. We were picking on Redis earlier. And I already looked at it. It's on a test machine, and I don't think there's anything important in it. So, if I expose some secret, NASA can hunt me down later. So you open it and it shows the file. If you've ever used Less, the interface is very similar to Less. But some of the cool things about Vim specifically are that it's designed for pure keyboard input. So if you're a touch typist, you can do everything you need to do in Vim without leaving the home row. Moving around, you can use the arrow keys on most things, but moving around, you can actually use your letter keys. So J moves down, K moves up, L moves to the right, and H moves back to the left. But then you're like, okay, I'm typing and I'm moving the cursor around. I'm not actually typing those letters in. Well, that's because you're not in a mode where you're actually entering text. to enter a mode, you've got you've actually got several options. I'm not going to go into all of them. Lowercase I is insert mode. If you hit that, you'll actually see the word insert down at the very bottom of your screen. And then you can start typing any letters, and those letters that you type will appear in your document. To get out of insert mode, you press escape. And now you're back in your overview where you're able to move around and access it. Now, the most important part, let's say you accidentally started Vim, or you connected to a machine and Vim was already running and you're like, oh my, is how do I get out? Well, it's 5 simple steps. You press escape, possibly more than once, just to get out of any special modes it might have been in. Then it's colon. So I'm going to hold down shift and press my colon. That's going to put my cursor down at the bottom with a colon there. This is where you can enter various commands, but the one I'm interested in is Q for quit. But what if I made some changes accidentally? Well, you need to tell it that you're serious about quitting. So you add an exclamation mark.
Quit emphatically.
Yes, or quit bang. So you add the exclamation mark and then you press enter. And now you're out. So exiting Vim is that simple. It's 5 simple steps, not 52. It is escape, colon, Q, exclamation mark, enter. And if you want to know more about Vim, go play with it.
We are saving the future generation from using Vim as their daily driver. And surely the only people that use it as their daily driver are the ones that couldn't get out of it, right?
And don't forget, if you do want to save that work because you worked so hard on it, you add a W in there.
Or you just use X. Colon X enter is write and quit in one step.
Cool. One fewer keystroke. No, Vim is fun. One of the interesting things about where you'll find Vim is your Linux machine will have a default editor, and so I think it's like the editor. I can't think of the word. System, basically a variable, system variable, basically, and that may be set to Vim. That may be set to Nano. If you're really serious, I guess you could set it to Emacs if you really wanted to. But on a lot of systems, it's Vim by default, and so people will end up in Vim because they're just trying to edit something, and it's. Let's see. There are some commands that just by their nature they edit a file, and so it'll pop up whatever's default. And so that's one of the ways that people get stuck in Vim. And you do occasionally find the horror stories of people first trying Linux. It's like, I got stuck in this program, I don't know how to get out.
Or they
sudo
just
edit.
Yeah, sudo edit. That's one of the ones.
Yeah, or they just hear is like, how do you edit a file? You use Vim or Vi. It's like, okay, let's do that. Now what?
Yes.
But another reason to know at least the very basics of it, if you work in any kind of system administration, is there are appliances, different boxes that you may not even be able to install stuff on. I can think of some that I've been in that you can't install. It's a very minimalistic box, Linux box for
VI.
For certain purposes, and it has VI, and that's what if you want to edit something or whatever, that's what you got to use.
Yeah. I know a lot of those are actually based on OpenWRT, which ships VI by default. And while you can install Nano, or whatever other editor you want to, VI is the one that's there, and you probably want to get used to using that. On one of those OpenWRT boxes, you've got all of 100K of disk space available to install programs on.
At one time, I knew a lot more of those shortcuts, but now I just make sure I know I for insert and how to quit and write. And, if you just know that, you can get by.
Yep.
Yeah. And when you're in Vim, you can do a :H, and it'll give you actually inline help and tell you all the commands and everything. So just like I demonstrated the escape :Q to get out, you can do an escape :H if you need some commands and can't remember what to do. It'll walk you through it.
Yep. Awesome. All right. It is Ken's turn, and Ken is going to jump on the XZ theme. What do you have for us, Ken?
Well, first of all, for all of y'all out there, you probably want to, at some point here in the near future, type in XZ space -- version to make sure you don't have 5.6 or 5.61.
True.
And second, as promised, I'm going to show you or talk you through using the Z standard with tar. If you want to find out all the options for Z standard, you can just type ZSTD space -- help, and that will give you all the options. And it's going to take probably 2 pages of your terminal, even if you've got it full screen.
Mm-hmm.
But some of those are going to be -- fast, which will give you very fast compression levels. -- adopt for dynamically adopting the compression level to I/O conditions, and -- ultra, which enables levels beyond 19 up to 22. That doing that may require more memory. But if you want to use it with tar, you can either do tar space -- ZSTD, and then the options you want to use with tar, the name of the tar file, and of course the name of the files or directory that you're wanting to compress. Now, you can instruct tar to use Z standard compression by also using -I and then putting in single quotes ZSTD space and whatever options you want. Like if you've got the show notes open, you'll see the first one I have is ZSTD space V space -- or space -V space -- ultra space -22. Yeah, I'm really going to compress this tar file. Then I have the end quote -CF, and then the name of the tar file. This one I just called Thorn's Chariot -L22 -log -TAR, and then the directory that I was going to be compressing. Now, that directory had files that came to a total storage area used of 1.23 gigabytes. Doing that Ultra 22 was able to compress that down to 629 megabytes. So it was compressed by 49.81%. But if you look at the show notes, you'll see it took nearly 20 minutes for that to do the compression.
Was it on your Raspberry Pi?
Actually, that was.
Aha.
Or, let me think. No, that was on my Chromebook.
Oh, okay.
I was bouncing around with it. And then the second way that I did it was I just used -I again, then in quotes, ZSTD space -V, that gives you the verbose, by the way, -10, about middle of the road compression, then close the quotes, then -CVF from the tar options. This time I named the compression file Thorn's Chariot -L10 -log -tar.zst, and the same subdirectory. Look how quick, and if you're looking at the show notes, you'll look, that took less than 3 minutes to compress it down from that 1.23 gigabytes worth of files to 823 megabytes. That's still some pretty good compression.
Yeah. So I would say, looking at that, most of the time it is not worth it to use one of those ultra compression levels. But if you got to save every byte, then it might be. Very interesting. All right. My tip is up next, and it is the continuation, almost the end of our how to resize the virtual machine's drive partition. And in the past entries in this tip, we've gotten all the way to the point to where we have resized the logical volume partition. And now we've got the underlying file system itself, which in my case is XFS. So there's an easy command. It's just XFS_grow_fs, and then you give it the location. In this case, it's in dev/mapper and then the name of it, which CentOS backups home. And then you can also run XFS_info. You do the exact same, the partition itself, and it will tell you all the information about it and let you confirm that you have indeed done the resize the way that you intended to. It is up to you whether you want to run something like an FSCK before and afterwards. Might not be a bad idea. The only thing that is actually left in this series is we then have to go in and unmount all, because we're kind of in several layers deep to be able to fiddle with these partitions. So the next thing that we'll do next week is unmount all of them so that you can actually once again boot the virtual machine. And that will be the end to this particular series. It has been a lot of fun, and I will definitely be coming back to it next time I have to resize something, because it took me a while to figure this out the last time I had to do it. So that is that. That's our tips. That is our news. I will let each of you get in the last word, and I will go again left to right over my radio dial, which will start with Rob, because he is the next one up. Rob, what do you have to close with? What do you want to plug?
All right. All I have to say this week is first, since Ken got 2 tips this week, I'm doing 2 next week. And second, you can come find me, find my website. Don't find me, come connect with me. But my website is robertpcampbell.com. Hear that? robertpcampbell.com. And on there, you can find links to my LinkedIn, my Mastodon, and a place to send me a little tip so I can have a coffee.
All right. David, anything you want to plug?
Well, I can never follow Rob. I mean, that's just awesome. So, but I mentioned it briefly earlier. I tend to always plug FLOSS Weekly when I'm on ULS, and the one time I got to be on FLOSS Weekly, I plugged ULS. So, it's circle of life. We got to interview Joshua Culp with the Asterisk Project, and he is a lot of fun. I got to meet him in person probably a decade ago, close to it, and it was just fun. I got to ask all the questions that have been burning, and looking forward to what comes next. So that's it for me.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and appreciate you jumping in there and hanging out with us on that day. All right. And Ken, anything you want to plug? You want to unmute yourself and then plug something if you have it? It's kind of nice that I can see the mute indicators. I can remind people before they start talking.
Yes, that is nice. But with it being springtime and people starting to get into spring cleaning, I just want to remind you, before you clean out that hard drive, you may want to back up just in case you clean out something that you did want.
That is absolutely true. Make sure to back up before you do your spring cleaning. All right. Well, when it comes to plugging things, I will plug. Obviously, there is all of the stuff over at Hackaday. You can see behind me if you're watching the live feed. My security column goes live there on Friday mornings. We have FLOSS Weekly over at Hackaday. But something else I've just recently started working on is trying to put some more general purpose videos up on my YouTube channel. And that is JP Bennett over on YouTube. And there's some Meshtastic stuff up there. The last one I put up is a very, very quick guide to running a virtual OpenWRT router, and then how to do a split IPv4, IPv6 local network, which if you want to find out what that means, go check it out at the channel. And it's a short video, but worth a watch. Thank you to each of you, Rob, Ken, and David, for being here. And thank you to everyone that was with us live. It was a lot of fun. Thank you to everyone on the download that get us afterwards. And hey, We will see you next week on the Untitled Linux Show. Hey, you enjoy the show but really feel like you're missing out? Want to be able to watch our smiling faces as we deliver the news? Want to be able to chat with us in the Discord? Get it ad-free and even more? Hey, it's Club TWiT that you're missing, and it's only $7 a month. Come on, take a look. Join the club.